My name's Morgan. I'm a third year STP in Bristol and specialising in radiation safety and diagnostic radiology. And I'm going to talk to you about my experience as an in-service trainee. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my background, what I've done, where I am now, transitioning into a supernumerary role, the opportunities being an in-service trainee has given me, the challenges that I've come across, and the main lessons that I've learned from being an in-service trainee. So a little bit about me is I worked as a maternity care assistant for 3 years, so I had some clinical experience. I then started the practitioner training program in healthcare science, radiation physics in 2019, which is a work-based apprenticeship. So I did my bachelor's degree as part of the apprenticeship. I did a portfolio and I was also working as part of the team. And then I worked as a clinical technologist for 1 year before starting the STP via the in-service route in my department. So I worked as an established member of the team for 4 years before moving on to the STP. So the transition to supernumerary, what does that mean? The definition is a person functioning as a substitute or assistant with regard to regular body or staff. So what I think that means for an STP is I'm not expected to take on regular workload as a registered clinical scientist would. But I would be expected to get involved in those tasks as part of my training and my learning. So the focus should be on my training experience rather than being required to deliver a service. So for example, for me, something I might be expected to be involved in is the quality control testing of X-ray equipment, learning how to do it and expanding on my current knowledge, but I shouldn't be relied upon to actually complete those tests as part of routine service. I had to learn to let go of my responsibilities that I did have and shift my mindset from moving to a learning role rather than more of a contributing role. One way I found really useful to do this is actually physically moving offices, so away from my old technologist colleagues into an office with clinical scientists and other trainees. Helped me remove myself from my old responsibilities, and it also made people aware that I'm now in a different role, so things that I'm expected to do might be different. My personal experience, my department have been really, really good at not relying on me to complete tasks that they know I'm capable of. There's been a very, very few rare occasions where I've offered my help if there's urgent situations where things need to be done, otherwise things will get like downtime of equipment affects the clinical service, but that was my choice. So how has being an in-service trainee given me the opportunity to grow? I think my prior training and my knowledge has given me a base understanding of many concepts on the training scheme, which has allowed me to engage in some deeper learning and research to build on my technical understanding. So an example, again, with quality control testing, I am competent to test multiple different modalities, and I know if equipment is out of tolerance, but being on the STP has allowed me to ask lots of extra questions early on in my training, understand what is causing the failures, like employ some critical thinking and see how these can be rectified and how it might impact the clinical service. Another thing that's given me is better time management. So having done the PTP, I had experience of kind of balancing that academic work, portfolio, and contributing to the team. But I've been able to use these skills, build on them, and implement more time management. So I have my own spreadsheets that I monitor my progress with. I share these with my training officer and my team. The other thing I make sure I do is use my 20% allotted university time to help me complete assignments. I have built strong relationships, having worked in the department as a team member for 4 years and then been here now in my 3rd year of the STP, been able to build really strong relationships with my team. They're aware of my current ability. I think they push me to perform maybe beyond the usual standard of an STP, which is really helping me develop and assist my future career. And another thing is that I used to talk to lots of different people in the trust as part of my old role. So I've kind of got those contacts in place where if I think, oh, it would be really good to talk to that person or build on this, but I can just go and kind of talk to them without having to ask who would be the best person to talk to. And I think those 3 points combined have allowed me to be a really independent trainee. I think my training is quite trainee-led rather than department-led. So although my centre have a training plan in place, I discuss that with my team regularly. I'm able to work autonomously. I guide my training activities, and I balance my workload. So for example, I'm aware of the areas that I lack confidence or competence, like certain modalities I don't do much QC testing on. So I know to volunteer myself for those tasks when they come up instead of relying on my training officer, which I think is preparing me for life after the STP. I'm going to have to organise myself, my time, and contribute to the workload. Challenges. I think one of the big ones is the assumption that I know it all already. So my knowledge and my skill set is limited to that of a technologist. So I've got technical understanding, but I lack that scientific understanding, that critical thinking that comes with being a clinical scientist. So I think colleagues often overestimated my understanding or expected me to know things, and that made me feel a little bit rubbish when I didn't know things. So it's really important that your colleagues are aware that you're on a training scheme. You're there to enhance your learning, your understanding. There are times you don't know answers, that's okay. And just communicate with people, make sure they're challenging you and they're not assuming you know things, you're developing those skills. A big one for me was feeling guilty. Another challenge, feeling guilty from stepping back from being a contributing member of the team to a supernumerary role. There's often group meetings which would allocate routine tasks, and sometimes due to staff shortages, there weren't people available to do assigned jobs, which means jobs are cancelled or they're postponed, and you kind of sit there feeling a little bit guilty about leaving your old role and starting the STP. It's important to remember that once you finish the STP, you're going to be a really valuable member of the team. And one of the ways I overcame this kind of sitting at meetings feeling guilty was I spoke to my training officer, my line manager, and we came to the conclusion that I didn't actually need to go to these meetings. If there was something coming up, I would be told about it. I found this also raised the awareness of other people to remind people that I'm supernumerary and help me feel better. Learning to say no. I'd like to say again at this point that I've been very fortunate that my training centre is really good and I haven't been relied on to perform tasks for routine service. So although this is not a challenge that I personally face, I think it's a really important one to touch on. I think as a trainee, you're expected to take every opportunity, say yes to everything. But there are times you're going to be asked to do something that doesn't benefit your training and is a task solely required for the service. And learning that it's okay to say no in those circumstances is okay, setting boundaries is okay, and this makes sure that your training experience is as good as it can be. And I think it's a really important skill to learn for the future as well. And then finally, I found reflecting quite difficult at the start, especially during my rotations, when the rotation for my specialism was very, very similar to my old job role. I think you need to I took a different perspective of how I could reflect instead of being like, oh, I already know how to do this. And then I've watched it and I still know how to do it. And looking at little things that you didn't know or things that you think, oh, it would be really useful if I went away and read up on that so that I have a better understanding. So trying to look at things from a different perspective, I found really difficult, really beneficial for reflecting when you kind of have already been exposed to a lot of these things. So the main lessons that I've learned, communication is key. So setting clear boundaries with your training officer or your team, you'll get the most out of the training program. Having regular meetings means you'll stay on track, and you're not going to be involved in work that's tied to your old role or not beneficial for your learning. Get comfortable with being uncomfortable. You're going to be put in some situations where you're going to have to say no or tell people that you don't know things when they might expect you to. This is a really normal part of being a trainee, especially when you might have some baseline knowledge, and it's okay to feel uncomfortable. And I think actually it pushes you to become a better clinical scientist. And then finally, embrace being a trainee. You're unlikely to get an opportunity where you've worked as part of a team and then you're given the opportunity to be paid to learn for 3 years. So embrace every experience, learn new things every chance you get, and take the time to develop your skills and maybe define areas that you're most interested in. So that's my experience. Thank you for listening.